Hello, I'm Edward October. Over the years, I've narrated more ghost stories, horror shows, and creepypastas than I can count. And yet, the crimes discussed on our true crime podcast managed to scare the shit out of me. This program is not suitable for children or the faint of heart. If you are such a person, go ahead and switch off this podcast. Listen to something else. Are you still with us? Well, we've warned you.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, Cam, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well.
Yeah?
Very
Anything
well.
new?
No. Besides, we have open seats to our trip. We just reopened them. We'll talk a little bit more about that when the episode's over. So if you're interested in coming with us to the UK,
Get on the bus.
discuss it after the episode.
All right. I'm
Ready? You ready for ready for what we have?
Yep.
It's
episode.
actually in the UK.
Oh.
This happened in the UK. I don't
Okay.
believe it's anywhere near where we're going, but it's in
You
the
never
UK.
know.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's
Ready?
have it.
All right.
Yep.
25-year-old Greg Reardon stared at his phone and wondered why Joanna Yeates, his girlfriend and flatmate, wasn't answering his calls. Greg, who was a landscape architect, had spent the weekend with his family in Sheffield, UK, which is about 4 hours north of Bristol, where he shared his apartment with Joanna. I mean, maybe she was just busy. It was, after all, the weekend before Christmas. Maybe she was shopping and baking and wrapping presents. But still, it wasn't like Joanna not to reply to him at all. Maybe her phone was dead. I mean, if it was, it had been dead all weekend because she hadn't responded to any of his calls or texts since before 8 p.m. on Friday. As Greg said goodbye to his family to take the 4-hour trip back to Bristol, his irritation turned to concern. If he thought all of his worries would be laid to rest when he got home, he was wrong. When he arrived at their apartment on Sunday, December 19th, 2010, he found one of the doors slightly opened. Their cat, Bernard, greeted him with feline urgency. He was clearly hungry and freaked out. Still, everything in the apartment looked in order, and it didn't appear as though that there'd been any sort of struggle or altercation. The apartment that they shared was one of several units in a large building that had been renovated and turned into separate living quarters. The quintessential Irish stone wall with climbing ivy surrounded the building. "Joanna?" he called as he entered, but he didn't get an answer. Her purse was there, as were her keys, and there was a bottle of cider that sat on the counter that was half full. Where was Joanna? So Greg called her cell phone again while calling out her name and looking into the closets, and then he stopped. He heard her cell phone, and the ringing was coming from inside their flat. "Joanna," he called out again. Any hope that he had that Joanna was somewhere in the apartment was dashed when he realized the phone was ringing from inside her coat pocket. The temperatures had not reached above freezing the whole weekend. Not only would she not have left the house without her phone, purse, or keys, but she definitely wouldn't have left without her coat. So now Greg was really worried. The door was open, her purse, keys, coat, and phone were all there, and the cat was traumatized. And with a sinking feeling in his gut, Greg Reardon called the police. Joanna Claire Yeates was a 25-year-old landscape architect from Hampshire, England. A delightful woman with short blonde hair and dimples who stood about just 5 feet 4 inches tall. She was privately educated at Embley Park and studied at Peter Symonds College. She graduated with a degree in landscape architecture from Riddle College. Then she went on to get a postgraduate diploma from the University of Gloucestershire. Joanna was a consummate professional. Her bright blue eyes were always looking towards the future. Joanna met Greg Reardon in 2008 at the firm of Highland Edgar Driver in Winchester, and the two were settling in as a couple. As the holidays approached, Joanna was excited about hosting a holiday dinner in their flat for some of their friends, and then spending the weekend with her family. Joanna, Greg, and the whole Yeates family were going to spend the weekend after Christmas in Scotland and celebrate Hogmanay, which is a Scottish word for the last day of the year. So in other words, New Year's Eve. But Joanna had told friends that she was concerned about spending the weekend alone in Bristol. She'd never really spent any time alone in the flat, and it's not really known if she didn't like to be alone or if there was something about her new home that worried her. One thing was for certain, it was in a wonderfully quaint, sought-after part of town that had very little crime. On Friday, December 17th, Joanna agreed to meet some friends at the Bristol Ram Pub on Park Street. CCTV shows her having drinks and enjoying the night. At 8 p.m., Joanna left the Ram to make a 30-minute walk home. Nobody at the pub detected anything amiss when Joanna donned on her white coat and said goodnight. At 8 to 10 p.m., she was seen on CCTV footage at the Waitrose supermarket where she bought the 2 bottles of cider. At about 8:30, while on her way home, she called her best friend Rebecca Scott, and they discussed Christmas plans. Rebecca, just like everybody else who encountered Joanna that evening, said that everything seemed fine. Rebecca said that Joanna told her that she had planned on doing some holiday baking and staying busy while Greg was away. At 8:40 p.m., Joanna was seen once again on CCTV footage purchasing a frozen pizza at the Tesco Express on Regent Street. Near the entrance to her road, she engaged comments with Father George Henwood, who was out walking his dogs, and they were talking about how cold it had been and how slippery the walks were. Just making that small talk. And that was the last time she was seen alive. When the police responded to Greg's desperate call, they found the same things he did. Her belongings were all there, along with a distressed cat. It was a cute little tuxie, little black and white thing.
Aw.
They retraced her footsteps throughout Friday evening. And as for the cider that she purchased, 1 bottle was still on the apartment, unopened, and the other one was half full on the counter. Strangely, though, they couldn't find the frozen pizza that they purchased. They could find the receipt, but not the pizza. The packaging was nowhere in the house or in the trash, and there was no evidence that she had even cooked it. Joanna's distraught parents went on television to ask for their daughter to please contact them, and they begged that if someone had taken her and was holding her hostage, to please let her go. And I saw footage of this. We all know that, and we always say, oh my gosh, that's so heartbreaking or whatever. But when you see how distraught her mother is on this, it's just, it puts it all in perspective. I mean, it's just, I couldn't even imagine.
I
Can't.
Nope.
The pain. I mean, It was just raw and just horrible. The police seemed completely taken aback. Joanna's lifestyle was one of calm, orderly domestic happiness. She didn't have any enemies or exes that meant her any harm. And she wasn't involved in any risky behavior, and there was really nothing that should have made her a target. In fact, the police were at such a loss and without motive or evidence that they made a public statement about the pizza that Joanna had bought. I mean, on television, a police officer actually held up a pizza box and asked people if they had seen anything like the pizza.
Really?
To please contact them. Yeah, they were like at a total loss. I mean, they thought that maybe somebody abducted her, murdered her, and then ate the pizza.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but even so, I mean, it was a common pizza brand, and there were probably hundreds of people in Bristol who had that pizza in their freezer. Not that pizza, but pizza like that.
Yeah.
They posted an award. It was £60,000, which now is the equivalent to 107 pounds, which is 135,000 US dollars.
It's quite a bit.
That's quite a bit. Joanna's boyfriend, Greg, and some of his friends started a website, and they utilized social networking to try to find her. And Greg, being the boyfriend, they always suspect people in your close circle. Well, he was cleared early in the investigation because he really was with his family 4 hours away the entire weekend. And he was at a complete loss and just utterly broken. And he said in an interview, quote, "She was my future." He had felt certain that they would end up getting married and spending their whole lives together. Cute couple, too. Very cute couple. On December 23rd, 2010, Joanna's father said, quote, "I think she was abducted after getting home to her flat. I have no idea of the circumstances of the abduction because of what was left behind. I feel sure she would not have gone out by herself of all things left behind." Privately, the family strongly suspected that she was already dead. By this point, the police believed that she personally knew whoever attacked her. The whole of England was hoping that she would be found safe and sound in time for Christmas. The press and television news channels ran segments about her disappearance daily. Joanna Yeates, the beautiful, talented woman who loved Christmas, was more than the media could resist. And, it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what makes some cases go viral, so to speak. But in England, the disappearance of Joanna Yeates had much the same effect as the disappearance of Gabby Petito, of what happened here in the United States. It was a complete media frenzy. Unfortunately, Christmas would forever be the darkest day of the year for Joanna's family and friends, as her body was discovered on December 25th, Christmas Day. She was found under a pile of brush and snow on the side of the road in Phelan. Located about 3 miles from Joanna's apartment, a couple walking their dog along Longwood Lane near a golf course walked by this pile of snow and found the shape of the pile kind of unusual. And so they circled back and took a closer look, and there she was. Joanna had been dumped, fully clothed, but she had one breast exposed. And she was also missing a sock. She was kind of like lying on her side. Since her body was frozen, it would take pathologists a little longer to establish the time of death and circumstances in which she died. In fact, for at least a day or two, investigators thought that maybe she had a traumatic brain event and either got confused or lost and just froze to death. But a few days later, on December 28th, the coroner announced that she had been murdered. They released her body to the family 5 weeks later on January 31st, 2011. Over 80 detectives worked the case of Joanna's disappearance and subsequent murder. It became one of the largest police operations in the Somerset and Avon Constabulary. They examined over 100 hours of surveillance video and sifted through tons of waste from the surrounding trash cans. Authorities warned women to lock their doors and not to travel alone at night. The police immediately compared the murder of Joanna Yeates to similar cases, wondering if there was any connections. Among those were 20-year-old Glenys Carruthers, who was strangled in 1974. 36 years had passed since the murder, but if her killer had been young at the time, it wasn't out of question that he could be responsible for Joanna's death, too. They also looked at the case of 25-year-old Melanie Hall, who disappeared in 1996, and whose body was found almost 13 years later. And more recently, Claudia Lawrence, a 35-year-old woman who went missing in 2009. Investigators felt that the details between Joanna and the murder of Melanie Hall were extremely close. They both disappeared after returning home from meeting friends, they were the same age, and the two women bore a striking resemblance to each other. The autopsy report showed that Joanna had not been sexually assaulted and that she had not eaten the pizza that she had bought on the way home. However, the exam revealed that she had been strangled and that she had over 43 injuries to her torso, head, and arms. Joanna had fought back with all her might, but unfortunately it hadn't been enough. Police said that her death had been slow, terrifying, and painful. Whoever had killed her had to be physically fit enough to subdue her. Witnesses came forward to say that they heard somebody scream, "Help me!" on the Friday night she was murdered, and another group said they heard 2 loud screams shortly after 9 p.m., but none of the witnesses called the police. So this meant that Joanna had been home only 20 or 30 minutes before she was murdered. If she was last seen at 8:40 on CCTV and she was about a quarter of a mile from her apartment at that time, then she had enough time to get home, take off her coat, open the bottle of cider, drink half of it before her killer knocked on her door. However, the police had also not ruled out that her killer could have been inside waiting for her to return. This would mean that somebody had either been stalking her or at least watching her, or it could have been somebody nearby, maybe a neighbor, perhaps somebody within her own apartment building. On December 30th, 2010, Christopher Jeffries, a 65-year-old former schoolmaster at Clifton College and the landlord of Joanna's apartment building, was arrested on suspicion of a murder. Forensic investigators searched his flat while Jeffries was being questioned. Jeffries was quite a character. He spoke with perfect diction, and he was also known as a private individual with a very high intellect. He spent quiet evenings reading books or watching an artsy film. That was totally his jam. However, Mr. Jeffries had long, white, wispy hair that he fashioned into an elaborate comb-over, and he was quite eccentric looking. Like, you'll have to see pictures of him. I mean, he just looked...
A distinguished gentleman
artsy,
or artsy?
artsy.
Okay.
Like, when I say wispy hair, like the comb-over was over the top part of his hair, and then like the bottom part of his hair was kind of long and standing out. He looked very artistic, let's put it that way.
1960s Andy Warhol-ish.
Kind of,
people.
But his hair had more of like a cotton candy effect to it. And as soon as word spread out that he had been arrested, the press and the public immediately said, yep, he did it. He's guilty. Nobody can look that weird and be innocent, that kind of thing. The police applied for one extension after the other to be able to hold Jeffries for as long as they could, and they finally released him on bail to a bloodthirsty, revenge-minded public. Jeffries was not only followed and hounded by the press, but several newspapers reported blatantly false, hurtful stories about him. Without a trial at all, the press deemed him a creepy, sexually depraved killer, while simultaneously labeling him as quite dour, boring, and gay. And what's more is that there wasn't any specific reason to suspect Jeffries of the murder of Joanna, other than he lived in the same building on the top floor. He had never been arrested, and he had no history of violence. Physically, he also didn't seem to be the person who could have overpowered Joanna and inflicted 43 separate wounds. Christopher Jeffries' friends offered to let him stay with them until Joanna's real killer could be caught because the level of anger toward him was at such a fever pitch. Not only did Jeffries worry about his safety, but his reputation was also in shambles. This is actually one of the worst character assassinations of a non-public figure that the press had facilitated in British history. They went after him for no reason. Meanwhile, during a routine questioning of the other residents in Joanna's building, 32-year-old architectural engineer Vincent Tabak, who lived next door to Joanna with his girlfriend, fell under suspicion. Tabak, a native of the Netherlands, who was ruled out earlier in the investigation, was suggested as a possible suspect to the police by an anonymous female caller, according to the British TV show Crime Watch. He had only been neighbors with Joanna for about 8 weeks and didn't know her first name until after it had appeared in the newspapers. In fact, just 2 weeks after Joanna and Greg moved into the flat, he left for a business trip to the U.S., where he was gone for 5 weeks. And during that trip, he engaged in porn and visited sex workers. He arrived back in Bristol on December 11th, just 6 days before Joanna was murdered. Once Tabak realized that Jeffries had been arrested, Tabak suddenly had all sorts of incriminating words to say about Jeffries, including his own theories, which, the police found odd. Vincent Tabak was known to many people as extremely intelligent, kind, and gentle, but socially awkward. His current live-in girlfriend was his first serious girlfriend. As a child, Tabak was considered odd and reclusive. The couple flew to the Netherlands for the holidays amidst the ongoing investigation of Joanna's death. The police then flew to the Netherlands to interview him and his girlfriend about the death of his neighbor and to learn what new information he had about his landlord, Christopher Jeffries. He became agitated when they asked him for a DNA sample and seemed to calm down once they told him that, it was, quote, just to eliminate him as a suspect from the investigation. Even so, they noticed that he had paced back and forth while they were there, and Tabak had a keen interest on how the forensic part of the investigation was going. Tabak's girlfriend expressed concern over her own safety and had told friends that she didn't want to return to her apartment because of Joanna's murder. Sometime at the beginning of January, Tabak's girlfriend left for Chile for a 5-week trip. On the morning of January 20th, 2011, the Avon and Somerset Constabulary arrested Vincent Tabak on suspicion of murder. However, this time around, they kept a tight lid on what the situation was and what made them suspect Vincent. So, they didn't want a repeat of the Christopher Jeffries situation in the media. Not surprising, though, like most friends and family of suspected killers, Vincent's family told the media that they were completely convinced of his innocence. Quote, There's no way he could have murdered anybody, many of them said.
That's what they all say, though, let's be honest.
Nobody wants to admit it, right? Tests were done on DNA retrieved from Joanna's body and clothing, and it matched that of Vincent Tabak's. However, the DNA tests were not able to say if the sample was saliva, semen, or skin cells. He was charged with her murder on January 22, 2011. Tebek initially maintained his innocence, claiming that the police had planted his DNA, of course, right? But later, on May 5th, 2011, Tebek pleaded guilty to manslaughter, maintaining that he had not intended to murder Joanna. He actually went to, I guess, the priest or somebody in prison and kind of confessed to them first. But just to note, the police didn't clear or release Christopher Jeffries from bail or suspicion until March 4th. That's a long time.
Yeah.
Investigators determined that in the months leading up to Joanna's murder, Tebek had used his computer to search for escort services and had made phone contact with some of the sex workers. He also viewed violent internet pornography that showed images of women being bound and gagged, held by the neck and choked, and then raped. During the investigation, police also found images of a woman who looked just eerily similar, like Joanna, and in one of the images, she's shown pulling up her shirt to expose her breast, which is ironic. You know, the woman in the photos wore a pink top, and when Joanna was found, she too was wearing a pink top with one breast exposed. None of the information about his pornographic searches was allowed into evidence at the trial, though, because the judge felt that it didn't prove that Tebek had acted with premeditation. Joanna had not been sexually assaulted, but later the police did feel as though that there was some kind of sexual component to the crime. You know, you got to wonder if the only reason she wasn't sexually assaulted is because that Vincent was worried that since Joanna had screamed, he might get caught in the act, so he abandoned that part of the plan.
Happens a lot. Why always, what have we said? Scream, scream, yell, even if you're a quiet, shy person.
Yep. Make a lot of noise. During the trial, the evidence showed that among Joanna's 43 wounds were cuts, bruises, and a fractured nose. Fibers from Tebek's car were found on her clothing. On the night of the murder, Vincent Tebek's girlfriend had gone to her office Christmas party. Tebek had dropped her off and was going to pick her up when it was all over. He texted her at 7:13 p.m. saying, quote, "I love you too. Hopefully party will be more lively. Just got home. Missing you. VXX." 45 minutes after strangling Joanna and putting her body in his car, Tebek texted his girlfriend, quote, "Missing you loads. It's boring here without you. VXX." He then drove around to find a place to dump Joanna's body. An hour later, he's seen on CCTV footage buying rock salt, beer, and potato chips. He texted his girlfriend again at 10:30 p.m. saying, quote, "How are you? I'm at the Asda buying Crisis. Was bored, can't wait to pick you up, VXX." The word crisis was supposed to be crisps, which, you know, it's either a weird typo or some kind of Freudian slip there. Bloodstains on a wall nearby where Joanna's body was eventually dumped, suggesting that Tebek had tried to hoist her body over the wall, but failed. He then dumped her on the side of the road and covered her with leaves, where, later that night, a heavy snowfall concealed her body until it was found on Christmas Day. It's not sure if his texts claiming to be bored were an effort to establish an alibi that he spent a boring evening at home, or if he was actually bored with the way his evening went, or both. At 1:30 a.m., Tebek picked up his girlfriend from the Christmas party in the very same car that he had just transported Joanna's dead body. At the trial, Tebek went on to say that Joanna had seen him out walking around that evening of her murder and invited him in. He also said that she had made a flirty remark to him while he was in her apartment, and when he went to try to kiss her, she started to scream. He claimed that the whole struggle and murder was, just to get her to shut up.
Oh,
Now, remember, she had just made it home, like maybe 15, 20 minutes at home, and that's his story. that she was all flirty, so I tried to kiss her, like within 15 or 20 minutes. Really?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. He's a creep. In fact, the defense attorney's wording during his opening statement insinuated that Joanna was somehow responsible for her own death, saying, quote, if she had stayed for one more drink, and that her screaming was, quote, the very act that caused her death. The defense attorney seemed to miss the point that Joanna was dead simply because his client had killed her. Most people would have simply apologized for getting the wrong idea and left the apartment, but, not Vincent.
Nope.
However, most of Joanna's loved ones and even the police didn't believe his story, which they're smart because it's unbelievable. To invite a total stranger into her apartment just because she happened to see him walking around outside and then making a pass at him was totally out of character for Joanna, according to all that knew her. Tebek, of course, was trying to minimize his culpability. Now, it's easy to understand how one might become obsessed with a murder that took place in your very own building. I know you and I would go crazy, right? Especially if neighbors across the street heard her screaming for help, but you didn't. But by all accounts, Tebek's interest in this case seemed to permeate his entire life. He complained to his coworkers that he was super stressed out because of the investigation. He talked constantly to his girlfriend about it. And taking a jab at police, he texted his girlfriend 2 days after the murder stating, quote, the whole situation is very mysterious. What happened to the pizza? And more importantly, what happened to her? Which he knew full well at the time that he had simply thrown the pizza and Joanna's missing sock away. I mean, nobody is sure why he felt the need to throw the pizza away. He didn't throw anything else away, like the cider.
Did he think there was DNA or something on it?
I don't know.
Saliva?
It's just something weird, right? I mean, he could have been trying to confuse investigators, kind of make it hard to pin down the specific time. Yeah, to pin it down. I mean, the poor cops got on saying, this pizza right here, if you've seen anything like it. I'll link one of the videos I watched, and it does have the police officer there saying, if anybody sees this.
Have you seen this pizza?
Right. It's like totally bizarre, but that's all they had to go on.
They're desperate.
Mm-hmm. The prosecution showed how Tebek checked the Avon and Somerset police station's website on an hourly basis, looking for information about the discovery of Joanna's body. He also looked up the differences in sentencing between manslaughter and murder. Now, he's leaving a nice little trail there.
Yes, he is. Thank you. Doing her job for us.
Mm-hmm. On October 28th, 2011, Vincent Tebek was found guilty of the murder of Joanna Yeates and was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 20 years. After his sentencing, it was also revealed that pornographic images of children, or CSAM, was found on his laptop. In 2013, he was prosecuted for possessing more than 100 indecent images of children and was sentenced to an additional 10 months.
10 months?
Mm-hmm. It's like 140 images that he had of CSAM. Yeah.
Ooh.
Just 10 months.
Not enough, people.
Not
enough.
In 2015 to be served concurrently with his life sentence for Joanna's murder. I mean, while Greg Reardon was sitting in his flat, crying and waiting for news of where his beloved Joanna was, her killer was sitting in his apartment right next door, doing internet searches on how long it takes for a body to decompose.
Ugh.
Christopher Jeffries went on to sue several of the newspapers involved for defamation of character. He sued more than 6 different newspapers, citing headlines like the one that appeared in The Sun, in which they described him as weird, posh, lewd, creepy. And just days after his arrest, one newspaper went on to say that Jeffrey's love of the dark avant-garde films creeped out his former students.
I mean, I like dark films too, but there's other signs.
But that's not one of them. Jeffries was totally innocent. I mean, just because you love dark avant-garde films doesn't mean that you're going to kill your neighbor.
No, that's what I mean. Like there's
they were reaching is what they were doing. Jeffries was quoting as saying that the ordeal surrounding Joanna's death had taken up a whole year of his life for having done nothing more than live in the same building with her. It was tantamount to psychological torture, he said. Jeffries won his libel suit for an undisclosed amount of money against, are you ready for this? The Sun, the Daily Mirror, the Sunday Mirror, the Daily Record, the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, the Daily Star, and the Scotsman. All the dailies.
Yeah.
And they won in connection to their coverage of his arrest and subsequent character assassination. Even Joanna's family and boyfriend Greg all condemned the newspapers for their shameful coverage. And mostly, those are all rag newspapers anyway.
Yeah.
Aside from the damage done against this one man, the real issue is the potential impediment to the course of justice. While Jeffries was not the one who was ultimately found guilty, if police had pursued him as Joanna's killer, it's doubtful that he would have gotten a fair trial as a result of the reckless journalism. If they brought charges against Jeffries, and as we all know, he was innocent, it's possible that a jury could have swayed based on the sensational headlines, and he would have been falsely convicted, right?
Yeah, falsely convicted.
As it was, even with another person in jail and charged for Joanna's murder, many felt that he was guilty of something other than just having weird hair and bad taste in films. ITV eventually made a movie about what Christopher Jeffries endured called The Last Honor of Christopher Jeffries, and this movie came out in 2014. And it's reported that Jeffries read and approved the script before the production began. A published anthology was made of Joanna Yeates' work, and an annual landscaping design prize was named after her for her students at the University of Gloucester. Joanna's boyfriend, Greg Reardon, started a charity website in Joanna's memory to raise funds on behalf of families of missing people. Her friends and family also planted a memorial garden in the Sir Harold Hillier Gardens in Romsey, where Joanna had worked as a student. It's sad because Joanna Claire Yeates had so much potential and so much positive character to share with the world, and her killer not only took her life, but he robbed her parents of years of loving her, and he robbed Greg Reardon of his future with her. He robbed the world of the goodness she gave, but he also shamed his own family, nearly destroyed his innocent neighbor, and brought immeasurable psychological trauma to his girlfriend that, he claimed to love so much. But we still don't know what was the reason. That's it. That was the murder of Joanna Yeates.
So many thoughts. So much. Thinking about just like what we were saying about the rag magazines and stuff like that, and just funny how, somebody can get behind. I mean, how many times we're like, yeah, he did it. Yeah, she did it. And then it comes out and it's like, oh, wow.
And no matter what you do, you're always going to say, oh, yeah, that guy did that. Because people always hear the bad stuff. And when the good stuff comes to light, they don't necessarily catch that. They only get the first thing.
Well, it's because we're a salacious world. I was going to say nation, but it's a world. That's, And also, thinking about, when you're falsely convicted or falsely accused, it's so much harder. People hear that headline. That's what they put in their head. And then it's like, oh, yeah, we made a mistake. That's that little bitty thing that's on page 8 at the bottom of the newspaper. So nobody catches that. And you're like, oh, yeah, that guy did it. And they're like, oh, no, he didn't.
Yeah.
And so.
Or they'll just say, oh, Tebek was found guilty of this murder, and they don't put Jeffries in the same murder. You know what I'm saying? He did cut his hair, because there's later interviews with him, and he did get his hair all cut off.
Wow.
But you look at him and you're like, okay, he does seem odd. And so, of course, you're going to pin that on him because he is odd. And when he had absolutely nothing to do with it at all. I don't even think he would be strong enough to do that kind of physical injury to her.
You never know, though. With anger and stuff, I don't know. I used to think that too. But
still,
it's that adrenaline, all of that. Woo, yeah. It's a lot. I don't know.
Listening to him speak, you just wouldn't think that would, I don't know.
But I also think, and we've talked about this how many times, tunnel vision. Somebody gets it. It's almost better to have somebody be responsible for it. And I hate to say this, prosecutors, but once they get that in there, they don't want to admit, oops, I might have made a mistake, right? Or,
they want to solve the case, and they want to solve it quickly. The town was upset. People were scared. So, I don't know.
And then this just goes back, and I think the number is somewhere around 4% that people sitting in prison, but I bet it's higher, that are
falsely accused.
Falsely convicted. They're sitting in prison now. It's so true. Once you get in prison, it is so much harder to get out. It is so much harder. People will come out and say, I did this crime. I'm sorry. I didn't admit it. I was on drugs. I did it. And then the judges will be, no, we already convicted him. Sorry. What? Yeah.
Just sad all around.
It is. So you want to talk about our trip?
Yeah.
Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, we opened it up. We originally had sold out, and we've had some more people ask us, if they can come along.
We had to hit a minimum number, and we did. But then we have friends that we don't know, but they're going to be our new besties, reach out to us and say, hey, can we still go? And so we were like, how can we say no?
Of course you can.
We called. Of course you can.
We did originally have a cap, and we had a minimum, and then we had a cap, and then we filled the cap, and then people said, but what about us?
How can we say no to our new best friends?
I know.
Seriously.
So we called, and we talked to the woman that's helping us with this trip, who is absolutely delightful. Her name is Sophia, by the way. We called Sophia, and I said, hey, Sophia, can we have more spots? And she's like, let me check. And just now, right before we got on to record this, she said, yes, go for it. Book more seats. So we only have 6 more seats to fill, and that's it. Once the 6 seats are gone, they're gone. No more. And you'll have to book for our next trip in 2026, which we haven't decided where we're going yet. And we want your help on that. But let's go back to 2025.
We are loading up on one of those jet planes, and we're flying across the pond. We're going to land in that Scotland, Edinburgh. There you go. That place, the motherland for you and I, as we have our maiden names come from there. And
well, my maiden name's German, but my grandmother's maiden name is Scottish. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Mine is not.
Yep.
So anyway, we're going to land there. We're going to do some creepy castles, some tours, anything that has a little bit to do with dark history. So it could be a little ghost, a little haunting, a little murder, a little gunslingers, some stuff. That's what this whole trip's going to be about. So we're going to go to That's right. Yeah. Scotland. Then we're going to go to York, which looks cute as a little pumpkin. And I believe that's Harry Potter Street.
The Shambles. Yes. Like some buildings were there since like 1300s. And
isn't that amazing?
Boggles my mind.
And then after that, we're going to hop on a little transportation thing, and we're going to head on down to London to see the Tower of London. We're going to do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
In London.
There's
the Eye. We're going to see the London Eye.
Jack the Ripper, who I've been following somebody on TikTok that says that Edgar Degas, she believes, was the Jack the Ripper, which is completely fascinating. But the trip everything's pretty much included. You get your plane tickets. And then once you get into Scotland, you've got somebody that comes and picks you up and takes you to the hotel where Cam and I will be at. And then on the way home, somebody will come and pick you up from the hotel in London and take you to the airport to fly home. We've got that. We've got buses that are going to take us to each city. We've got a tour director, our own Julie McCoy, take us from place to place. It's going to be fun. All your breakfasts are included. There's a mystery dinner in London on our last night that we get to have. We get 2 dinners, and then every day you get a breakfast, right? Mm-hmm. There's little side excursions if you want to go to. We haven't decided if we're going to go on the excursions or not, but they're like to Whitley Island, all different kind of day tours that would be fun to do. It's going to be fun.
I think what is going to make this unique, it's not only that we get to hang out with everybody and be besties, but we do get a tour guide on our bus that goes everywhere with us. But then on each site, we get another tour guide that's somebody that specializes in telling us about the history and things like that. So the person that's on the bus with us is going to be with us the entire time, from Scotland to York to London. Like if there's any issues, any problems, they will be our go-to person. So if
they take care of it all. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I do believe, and I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure because we're in a group tour, we hop to the front of the line, which let me tell you, that is a blessing. Mm-hmm. People do not like it. I, however, love it. When I say people don't like it, it means the other ones that are sitting there.
The people that are waiting in line and you butt in front.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But so it's going to be fun. You're going to get us 24/7 on the entire trip. Unless you want to go off by yourself, that's fine. But otherwise, we're going to be your new best friend.
We did pad it. We did pad it with some time if you want to do something. Some people are big shoppers. That's fine. I'm not a big shopper. In fact, I would rather go see stuff than eat or shop.
Yeah.
So I would rather go to a museum and do that. But other people aren't. There's people that are huge I want to go shopping. I want souvenirs. I want this. So we padded it with some time for you guys to do that too.
I actually wouldn't mind hitting like a cool charity shop or something, a little thrift. I've got a thrift just to see what's out there. I'm hoping actually to maybe get in touch with some other podcaster friends, true crime podcaster friends that are over there. And maybe we can do some meetups. Like
we did have a few reach out to us, right?
Yeah,
that they want to.
When we first announced this, But once it gets closer, I'd like to set something more up. Like I said, we've got 6 seats left. If we don't fill them, we don't fill them, but they are open.
Up to you. So, it would make a great friends trip, girls trip, boys trip, boy-girl trip, family trip, whatever you. I think we have a little bit of each of that on our trip with the people coming. So
we have a mother and son. We have a married couple coming. We have somebody celebrating a milestone birthday. She's not going to.
She's 21.
Yeah, she's not going to turn 21 on our trip, but she bought this trip for her birthday.
She's not really 21.
Yeah, she is. Hush your mouth.
She is to us.
Hush your mouth. But yeah, do something special for yourself or you and your best friend and come hang out with us. Anyway, that's all I've got.
That's all I've got. So until next week, remember, same bat time, same bat channel, and remember, lock your doors.
Keep passing by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Love ya. For more information about this episode, as well as all other sources, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by the hosts, Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertesi from We Talk of Dreams. You can reach Nico at wetalkofdreams.com. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from OctoberPod VHS. You can find all of his great works on YouTube. Please make sure to like and subscribe to our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter with the handle at Our True Crime Pod. You can also email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. We would also at this time like to thank our patrons. We would be so lost without you. Thank you so much. And if you would like to help support the show, you can check us out on patreon.com/Our True Crime Podcast. You can also show your support by leaving a 5-star review on Apple or simply just tell your friends about us. It's that easy. Love ya. In fact, just 2 weeks after Joanna and Greg moved into the flat, he left for a business trip to the U.S., where he was gone for 5 weeks. And during that trip, he engaged in porn and visited sex workers. USA.